Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm with Alan Campbell of Camlow Cellars. We're here in the beautiful Sonoma Valley. And Alan, welcome, and tell us a little bit about Camlow Cellars and yourself.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Alan Campbell, and I'm from Camlow Cellars. The name is a mashup between the winemaker Craig Strehlow and myself, Alan Campbell, so Camlow. That's how we came up with that. It was kind of a necessity. We needed a business name, and it happened. So we decided to make our first wine together in 2012. 2012 was our first vintage. It was mainly wines from another vineyard. So we had it already in barrel and we created the label together. I have a vineyard. I have a 4-acre Pinot vineyard based in the Green Valley portion of the Russian River Valley. So for those of you who don't know where that is, it is in the western section of Russian River Valley. So that's not the flatlands. As you move west, it becomes small micro hills and the little nooks and crannies of microclimates. And that's really one of the beauties about the Green Valley appellation. So in 2006, I put that vineyard in and I have all Pinot. There's 4 clones. And we decided to, start in that area because it's one of the best Pinot growing areas in the country. And because it's cool climate is kind of interesting if you're into the climate aspect of vineyards where the fog moves into the valley of Santa Rosa in the late afternoon evenings, cooling down that region. Where I am, the fog doesn't come in until after dark. So we get a little bit later heat. We stay warmer at that point. But in the morning, the fog burns off quicker in the valley of Santa Rosa, in the flatlands, but it doesn't burn off as quickly where I am. So we have a cooler morning. So as a result, we're actually cooler than most of the Russian River Valley. So that cool climate provides a great environment for Pinot and for the growing time temperature it needs. Because I call it a delicate monster.
So you started making wine in 2012, and are you focused exclusively on Pinot Noir, or are you making anything else? And what's your case production?
We started in 2012, and now we do our only estate. I have the vineyard is 4 acres. I sell half, and I make half at a certain point, and now we pretty much make it all. So our case production starts at about 400 for most of the vintages, and we actually increased this year, I think, to almost double that. So we also do a whole cluster of Pinot Rosé, about 100 cases of that a year. And that's kind of a unique item. It's beautiful. It's a great, nice, elegant wine.
So small case production, you're direct to consumer?
We do direct to consumer. We do have a couple 3-tier system people that we're working with, but we're trying to push the direct to consumer, obviously, because it's better for us and,
for the customer.
We think so too, as well. It's a difficult battle.
So tell me, Alan, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
Well, it has to go back to my parents, and they would drink the ubiquitous jug wine from Carly Rossi. And that was it was that or Gallo Hardy Burgundy. So, first real wine experience, probably that's,
Well, if we stepped up a little bit past that, what would you say is the first or most memorable wine you've ever drunk, and what was the occasion?
One of the first ones was probably an early Chardonnay in the middle 80s when I was in college. And I think it happened to be a Rutherford Chardonnay. And one of my photographer friends had that. And we decided his dad was into wines and he brought it to the house. And I think that's probably the first time that I'd really sat down and had a complex wine.
Mm-hmm. And I know you just got back from Mexico. Traveling the world abroad, what is the best foreign wine you've ever drunk?
Wow, you're going to pin me down on that? Okay, I have a weakness for white Burgundy. Going to Beaune and tasting through different houses that were there, probably the top of the list. Yeah, there's some other wines but that you wanted the best. That's, for me, that was my weakness.
And continues to be. Among all the populations of the world, who do you think gets to drink the best in terms of quality?
Well, we're blessed here in the United States with quality. I think that there are so many regions that have really good wines. Obviously, Europe is established, but South America, Australia, New Zealand. So I I think the quality is there all over the place. Even South Africa has some very, very interesting wines. It's really hard to pin that down for me. I can't really say one country because I think there's so much opportunity. And now with, global commerce, we're able to see those wines and, at reasonable prices, which, in some instances it's hard. You wonder, how can you get that bottle here for that much money? I mean,
a few of those wines coming over from Europe are a little shocking how they can be so inexpensive and yet so good.
It's incredible. Yeah. It's stunning.
So with that little weakness you have for bone, do you have a cellar where you're collecting wine?
I have a cellar. It's not a large cellar though. I don't particularly collect a whole bunch of wines. I did earlier, and I kind of weeded out a lot of the stuff. It's kind of an interesting. I've talked about this frequently with friends who drink a lot of wine. Is that when we were younger, we liked the big Cabernet and the meaty wine that was somewhat younger because we couldn't afford to age it for a long period of time, and we couldn't afford to buy the real big producers. So we tended to like certain wines. We kind of went into some Zinfandel stuff, and then I was introduced to Pinot. And for me, Pinot has been an incredible staple. I enjoy different varieties of Pinot, not so much red Burgundies, but I enjoy other Pinots. Then I moved into the white Burgundy phase of whites and other whites that were included. And kind of that's where I am now. But we tend to think too, is now we're kind of leaning toward going into some Austrian and some Riesling wine. So it's kind of been a cycle where it's gone from this heavy, heavy wines to more of lighter, less tannic wines. We occasionally like the big Italian wines and the Northern Italy stuff and some other things, the south of France as well. But kind of weird. It's been an evolution. I guess you get a little older. You're like, okay, I don't need to go chew on a barrel today. But it's hard to age wine, and my cellar is I don't have a big, elegant cellar. It's just a normal underneath the, downstairs kind of a, decent, it's temperature, oriented. But
speaking of Pinot Noir and other varieties, do you think there's such thing as a perfect variety?
There's so much to choose from. How could one thing be perfection? I mean, it's really depends on your mood, what you're doing. It depends on what you're eating. Some wines I think are designed to drink. Some wines I think are designed to have with food. And so there's no perfect one.
What is your opinion of wine critics and scores?
I think it's generated a monster in the sense of what people expect from, wines. And I think it has opened up doors for people to try new things. I think that's one of the benefits of it. I think the drawbacks have to do with it. How can you have so many wines that are, scoring this, and you end up with situations where people you submit your wines and then you get a score and they want you to buy this and buy that and buy that. So in that sense, people are pushing their agenda. And I think it's a double-edged sword. The benefit, I think, is showing people that there are wines out there. And for me, that's giving attention to people who don't have as much firepower behind them to promote their wines and get their name out. I think that's, for me, probably where having a score benefits you more. But the actual scores, I don't know.
So I'm going to put your back up against a wall as a wine consumer. Red, white, or rosé?
All.
Still or sparkling?
Still for me.
Okay. Yeah. And do you drink bubbles?
I do.
And do you have a preference for domestic or champagne or?
I'm kind of the weird one. I don't like aged bubbles. It's not my thing. I actually prefer younger bubbles. I think that some of the domestic products, both here and other places besides Champagne, are very, very good. Then again, I'm not a big bubble drinker. So for me, it's kind of up in the air. It's a toss.
So going back to red, white, and rosé, since you chose all three of them, how do you approach food and wine pairing?
Wow, that's good. Interesting because my business is food photography. So I'm always pairing food with wines for different features with cookbooks and things of that nature. So I'm not afraid to have red wine with fish because I think Pinot and lighter reds can do absolutely fine with fish. Depends on what sauces you're using or whatever. Maybe some other whites tend to be lighter meals, things of that nature. Salads work really well. Same thing with rosés. I like rosés and whites with spicier stuff. Bigger reds, sure, red meats and things of that nature, pastas, things with tomato-based sauces tend to go well for me with that. So I kind of look at what the acid is in a wine, and then I look at how it balances with the acidity in the dish and the sweetness. And that combination really helps clean the palate and then open up what you're tasting.
So I don't know if this has happened with you with wine. I know you told me you just got back from Mexico where you were drinking a lot of tequila. Any special remedies for those hangovers?
No real remedy. Just make sure you drink a lot of water and monitor your intake.
So what do you think that a non-drinker loses out on by not tasting your wines? What are you trying to express in your wine?
Balance is really one of the keys for our wines, is that we live in a world where a lot of Pinots are big, higher alcohol, and then that are from California, and rather other Pinots from different areas of the world tend to be a little bit less alcohol, mainly because of where they're grown and the fact that we are blessed that we can ripen grapes and still have great acidity. And finding that balance for us is important. And we like to think of our wine as somewhere in between California and a Burgundy. We like the balance of the acidity. It really has to have that brightness. Otherwise, it doesn't feel good on the palate and it doesn't age. Mm-hmm. If it's it's too high, it won't. We feel it doesn't age.
So if aliens were to land on the property right now, what wine would you want to present them with? They're being introduced to you.
Oh, I'd have to do we call it the Magna Porcum, big pig estate. And that would probably be our 13 right now. In fact, you're trying a little bit of that.
Yes, I am.
And so that's probably right now the most mature wine we have. So I'd pull that out. If it was my own, that would be, first I'd set them up with a little rosé.
Got to wet their palates.
Absolutely.
So having your own vineyard and having your own property and knowing it intimately, would you agree that each vintage tells a different story? Do you find that there are more similarities from vintage to vintage or more variations?
Wow. I've had my vineyard since I put it in 2006. So it's been quite a few years now. I take care of it mainly. So I'm involved in it all the time, not every day, of course, but all the time. So I see the changes, not only in the growth of the vineyard, but once it's been up to maturity, how different sections are affected by moisture, how different sections are affected by nutrients, and what you've been given in the land. And some areas are weak, some areas you're working hard to try to get things to work. So yes, variation in vintage is weather-based, rain, water-based things, but it's also how the vineyard handles those things. One section may be prolific one year, and then the next year it's not as prolific. You're wondering why. You do the same principles, and you target things, you prune similarly, you fertilize similarly, you do weed abate the same or more aggressive. So one year you'll have a totally different set. So yeah, variation year to year is crazy. So, and especially with the yield, one year you'll have 800, you'll have 8 tons, and next year you have 14. So this year was huge. So yeah, that variation is, I think maybe the question you're asking me too is, does it translate into the wines? And I think it does, but I think winemaking techniques now, you can duplicate things pretty darn well. Mm-hmm. And you can get, by picking at the right acid, the right bricks, that's your style, what you're working for. You can do those, especially in a vineyard where I can go out and I can test things and I can watch what things are doing. I can drop fruit if I need to get something to ripen more aggressively. So a lot of big wineries don't do that hand stuff. The small ones do. But in that sense, yeah, those things affect the vintage every year. But we try to get the vintage to speak with the similar winemaking techniques. And I think that really, it comes out and you see the variation in just, how maybe one year it's not as heavy a wine. You don't have as much density in the actual wine. It's not as not as dark. Or, maybe the acid was a little different, but, you try to have a recipe that you're working with and you let the vineyard dictate your flavors. And then you kind of use your recipe to bring a good finished product. Your variation is, I don't think it's as extreme as it used to be for winemaking techniques now.
Are there any signs or predictors that will help you determine the outcome of a harvest?
Well, sure. You look at set. That's always the biggest thing. As you go out during bloom, you look at, what's happening. Do we have rain at bloom? Do we have, cold weather? Do we have drippy fog? All these factors, determine how much is going to, how much fruit you're going to get set. And once you see set, you kind of determine, okay, there's a lot. Do I need to, what do I want to do in the end? How do I adjust that? So yeah, there's definitely factors, with heat. Also affects, whether you're going to need to supplement water or whether you're not. And, see if you want a situation, where maybe a section doesn't need water, but one does. So, in a small vineyard, you're able to address that on a pretty close basis.
Yeah. And then sort of predict what you think is going to happen throughout the harvest.
You do, yeah. But you never know until you get into August, September, whether you get a huge heat spike. And if you get that spike, it's like, okay, well, how do I, maintain, good moisture in the grapes? Do I have to water them? If you don't get that heat, what do you have to drop fruit? So things end up ripening. So it's all these little tools that you use to balance out and to kind of get things where you want them.
Do you have any rituals that you perform at the start of harvest or throughout harvest?
Not really at harvest. It takes a lot of good beer to make wine. So we, tend to, harvest when you're done with that. Everybody gets some good beer.
So many winemakers are known for walking through the vines. You walk through your vines every day. Do you talk to your grapes? Do you talk to the vines as you're walking through, or do you wait till it's in barrel? And if you do talk to it, what do you say to it?
I don't think I talk out loud. You look at stuff and think about it. I think that's more of my style. I'm not a, I guess, voodoo person. So, no, I don't go out there and, look at you. No, probably not. But I think good things.
Telepathy.
There you go.
When you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't know what I wanted to be until I was in college. I kind of wandered around and did all kinds of things. And then I found photography. I'd done photography all my life, just putzing, and something clicked. And that's really when I found out that, I wanted to do that. And that was 30 years ago. So I've been working for myself for 30 years doing photography.
And at what point did you decide that wine was going to be part of that future?
Oh, well, that's it. I bought a piece of property, and at the time there was basically a horse pasture on it. And I had horses being boarded there from some people. And, I came down one day and everybody was gone. They picked up and left. They didn't pay me, by the way. So I looked at it and said, well, I'd let them be for the winter time. And some of my friends, I was talking to them about wine. I was getting into Pinot, and I said, well, I have this big square. I might as well put something on it. So I did all the research and went to Sonoma State, and, did a bunch of classes there and met with friends who were developers and, kind of got a plan. I went around to different wineries and friends and tasted wines and different clones and kind of what I was looking at and seeing what other people were planting. And I kind of went the other direction and didn't plant what everybody was planting. Mm-hmm. And away we went.
So an accidental winemaker.
Pretty much. Yeah. I did make wine as a hobby with my father-in-law. He was a very, very good fruit winemaker. And so, he would make plum and berry wines and rhubarb wine. And, he was award-winning all over the States. In fact, I think there's a award still in his name at the Indianapolis State Fair for fruit winemaking. Huh. So that's where I get started doing that. And I made some grape wines, just pretty awful stuff. And then I made some good stuff, Homemade, it can be hit or miss. It depends.
Well, your 2013 that we're drinking right now is quite delicious. So
thank you. Thank you very much.
Normally I ask winemakers what they do in their free time. You're a photographer, and winemaking might be in your free time. But when you're not taking photos and you're not making wine, what do you do in your free time?
I like the outdoors. I've always enjoyed being on the water fishing, out in the water diving. I don't have so much time for that anymore. I have children, so they're getting older, and one's off in college and one's in high school. And it's kind of like coming back to full circle. Hopefully I can start to do more of those things. So yeah, those are the kind of things that are outdoor stuff for me.
Well, hopefully you're allowed to or able to get a romantic evening in once in a while with your wife. And so out of curiosity, for a romantic evening, what wines would be on order?
Well, it won't be Pinot Noir because my wife does not like Pinot Noir. So
wow.
Astonishing. Yes, I know.
You haven't developed this in her in all the years you've been making it?
She's like, no, give me my Zinfandel or give me a Syrah or Cab or something. She's on that. She's down in that, the big wines category right now. Uh-huh. I'm hoping later she'll twist. So wine-wise, I probably would be a white Burgundy. And we like to either go out to dinner or we like to make dinner. I cook a lot. I'm the cook. She sits there and approves things. So for us, it would be a nice dinner. If we really want to be fancy, we go, pull a white Burgundy and that or a really nice Syrah.
So to get you in the mood, the white Burgundy; to get her in the mood, the Syrah.
Yeah, Syrah's infidel for her. Yeah. Although Pinot is good. I like Pinot.
Of course. Are you a supporter of any sports teams?
In the sense of just being a fan?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I love baseball, I love football. I watch basketball when it's at the end. Nothing against it. It's just, there's a lot of basketball games.
And if one of your teams were to win, what bottle of wine would you want to gift them with?
Oh, definitely the 213 Pig, the big pig.
Across the board, the big pig.
Yep. So those are our two wines. And the rosé we make is the Flying Pig, Sous Falon, and it actually is. It's a great starter wine, but it's So we've had we're into vintage 16 we'll be releasing very soon for the Big Pig, and it's done very well. We're very happy with it. We just want to get more of it out there. The hungry mouths of the world.
If a VIP was photographed from any walk of life, living or dead, at a restaurant, and in the photograph at the back was the Big Pig sitting on the table, who would you want that person to be?
It would be interesting to sit down and chat with Ernest Hemingway.
Ooh.
I think his interest in things was, very, very wide.
And
that or Teddy Roosevelt, somebody like that.
I like how you're picking these big men, so the Big Pig would be a perfect pairing for them.
There's women that would be very interesting. Well, one of them that came to mind would be Mother Teresa. Although I don't know if she would partake. But I guess for me, it would be finding somebody that where the intellect of something where would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. So what was the best piece of advice you ever received?
Never give up.
And if you could offer some advice to our listeners today, what would you suggest to them?
Never give up. Times 3.
Times 3.
Yep.
So what would you say is your proudest achievement in your work to date?
Being able to stay in business for 30 years. So there's not one really pinnacle of success that I've had that I there's milestones that you complete. But the ability to have longevity at something that typically most people don't get to. And, being able to dodge all the bullets along the way, and especially with the way the last 20 years has been and the evolution of my craft from, traditional style to digital style, to navigate those waters and then, not only maintain but grow. I think that's probably would become my feeling about it.
Wonderful. So tell me, complete the sentence. A table without wine is like?
An empty table.
What do you think we'll be drinking in 100 years' time or 300 years' time? Will we be drinking?
As long as there's booze, there'll be people drinking. I think you'll probably have standards. We're going to have to figure out the water in the world. That's going to be the key factor. Mm-hmm. We only have X amount fresh water. So let's hope that we continue to have that, and think that there's big issues with that coming around the corner, unfortunately.
Well, let's say that we ran out of water, which we will hopefully not do, and you were sent to a deserted island. What are the 3 wines you would take with you?
3 wines. Well, I'd have to take the Big Pig because I make it. I grow it. I don't make it. Craig makes it. I grow it. He'll, want to clarify that. I would take a bottle of Coach de Riz, white Burgundy, probably a Montrachet. I would probably take a vintage port because, after the other 2 are going to be gone, at least I have one to sip around for a little while.
Well thought out. What is one winemaking region in the world you still want to explore?
I have two.
Okay.
I have been to New Zealand, which is fantastic, very different, very unusual in the sense of comparison for both the islands. I have not been to Australia. I would like to go to South America and see that. That would be fantastic to see. And then I would like to go to Australia. So those are two that right now interest me.
They're at the top of the list.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have been to others. Mm-hmm. So, there's a few left on the list, and those are the main ones. Yeah. South America first, then Australia.
I agree with you. There's so many great places to go and so many great wines of the world. Hard to pick where to explore next. What's fascinating about when you go places and travel is you get to taste things that are only there. They're not spread around. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's kind of like ours. Ours isn't more. I mean, we're very small. We're located in a little postage stamp in California, and it's like, how do you find us? Well, most of the times you stumble upon us. And that's kind of one of the beauties about, local regional wines is, and not only regional wines, but regional products. So if you don't go out and stumble around and get lost some days, you're not going to find those things. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really, really the ultimate, beauty of traveling and seeing different regions. Well, before we go, just very quickly, some of the wines you've talked about, there's a big correlation between wine and food. This is called Wine Soundtrack. So let's talk about a few of the wines that you've mentioned, and you tell me what music it makes you think of or what you'd want to listen to. So let's start with your Montrachet. Montrachet music, probably just a relaxing, easy listening. I call it, basically front porch music, just sitting there. Nice day. It's not country. It's not rock and roll. It's just kind of easy listening music. And what about that Zin your wife likes so much? It's big. She likes big Zin. So I'd probably go with punk rock. And that bottle of port that you're going to be sipping on for a long time. Probably classic rock. And last but not least, the Big Pig. What was I listening to last time I had to? I was listening to, I think I was listening to the Eagles. And in fact, I know it was. I think that's probably, that's a good fit. Yeah, I like that fit. Take it easy. Take it easy. We'll sit back, sip it, and take it easy. I'm not a giant fan of classical music. They have their place at times, but I kind of lend myself to other things. So absolutely, whatever the dial moves to sometimes. Well, Alan, thank you for joining us today. And before we go, can you let people know where they can find Camlow Cellars? Can they visit you, find you online? Where can we taste your wonderful wines? Absolutely. We are online at camlowcellars.com. There are two of us, Craig and Alan, and it's, either Alan at camlowcellars.com or Craig at camlowcellars.com. Our phone numbers are on there. When you pick up the phone and dial us, those are the people, we get us. You don't get anybody else. So we do tastings by appointment. We make our wine out in West County area at Freeman Winery, and we do appointments by appointment, and that gives us a chance to taste people through our bottled wines as well as we can taste them to the barrels. So we're available, and come see us. Wonderful. Sounds like a special experience. It's fun. We like to meet new people, and we like to share what we make. It's a passion for us, and you put a lot of effort and a lot of focus into making the wines. And then you turn around and then it's sitting there in the bottle and you're like, wait a minute, I got to sell it. And that's the hardest part for, when we get people who try our wines at tastings, oh, this is really good. That's what we like them. Thank you. Well, we'll hopefully come visit you again. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much, Tia.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.